right, so I'll give you an introduction. We'll talk about the history, all the different components of the MPO, what it is we produce, and what services we offer. As far as introduction to the MPO, we'd like to make sure everybody knows that everything that we produce, we try to make all that available on LakeSumterMPO.com, and on there you'll find lots of information such as our mission statement, all the planning documents we produce, all the information about the organization itself, and we've got stuff that goes all the way back to, I think, '05 on there. All right, so hopefully we all know that MPO stands for Metropolitan Planning Organization, and we are a regional agency, so it's a regional form of government, and the focus is definitely on transportation in terms of law. The thing that I take pride in, as several other MPOs around us have changed their organization names to TPOs, because the perception is, well, that makes more sense to the public. Nonetheless, if you say, I serve on the TPO, they're still inevitably going to ask you, what's that? You say, oh, transportation planning. Okay, that's great. But the fact is, this MPO, we really are more than transportation. It's just that transportation is the focus. We do get into growth issues, which was a very, very hot topic 4 years ago. And we do get into areas like economic development, environmental planning, sustainability, which is a word I'm not as high on these days, but trying to balance social, economic, environmental issues. And really the best part of the MPO is the coordination aspect of us serving kind of as a bridge between federal agencies, state agencies, and then helping out our counties and cities. And really that was the intent when MPOs were created back in the late 60s and early 70s. We are on Facebook, and I'm trying to get better at using Facebook. I'm not doing as well as I'd like to. I do much better on my personal Facebook page than I do on the MPO page. But we're getting there. We're trying to really use this to promote events and public involvement opportunities. The history of the MPO, I actually found MPOs fascinating since I was in college, because I was trying to learn how to be a planner at the time, and my professor said, you should go work for, do an internship for the MPO. And I said, what's that? He goes, oh, you'll find it really interesting. It's this regional form of government that nobody knows about. So that was the case up in Tennessee, is that some MPOs, and maybe politically it's the way that they're structured, you may not even know they exist, because they're hosted by a city or a county, and they really are not visible. The actions are visible, but the agency itself is not. Ours is a little bit different. So the history goes all the way back to the 60s, Federal Highway Act. And the first thing was, in order to even receive federal funds for projects, you have to show that you're part of a 3C planning process, and this still is in the language all these years later, continuing, comprehensive, and cooperative. So that's kind of the mantra that what we do when you start a project and study it, it is quite continuing for years before you actually see that project completed, typically. Comprehensive, we try to incorporate all the plans of the affected jurisdictions. Cooperative, although we're all supposed to work for the public, I have found that some agencies are more cooperative than others. So we always try to use this whenever they're not being cooperative to remind them that they're supposed to be federal law. The Highway Act in '74, that's when MPOs became official, and really the idea was this, and one of the worst examples happened in Florida, in Miami, with the Overton community. The interstate project that was planned took a very well-established black community in Miami and put the interstate right through the community, completely disjointed any social fabric that had once been there. And this happened all over the place. In fact, in Memphis, Tennessee, you couldn't be riding Interstate 40, and just all of a sudden, you have to take the Beltway. There's no option, because if you keep going, the interstate will stop. And the reason is because there was an injunction filed for the very same reason, that the interstate was going right through well-established black communities in Memphis. So MPOs, this is part of the origin, is not only to have that 3C planning process, but to also make sure that the local issues are not steamrolled over by federal or state desires. And So right now, the threshold, since MPOs were created in federal law, has been 50,000 people in an urbanized area. So that's not 50,000 people in your county or 50,000 people in your city. It's 50,000 people in an urbanized area, irrespective of jurisdictional boundaries. Now, why was the number 50,000 chosen? Because it felt right at the time. Back at that time, if you were a city of 50,000 or more, typically on your atlas, you would see that denoted as being a significant location. These days, a community of 50,000 not quite as impressive as it was 30 years ago. So there is proposed legislation at the federal level to potentially change that threshold from 50 to as high as 200,000.
Does that have any real effect as far as the MPOs?
It could for us.
Huh?
It could for us. There's some,
In terms of staff or in terms of your
whether we have one or
scope
not.
of work?
Whether we have one or not.
Oh, I see, just because of, is this or not that, not considered urban?
If they change the threshold, the first question is there a grandfathering? And if there's not, then the roles of the MPOs that no longer exist, those duties fall to the State Department of Transportation. So, and the point of that is back to governance. Why were MPOs ever created? And so by doing that, you're taking away the ability for locals to have a direct dialogue with state and federal on these investments. And that's really the key word that I try to use with committee's and board, is that our real primary goal, aside from planning, is definitely to prioritize how we invest the funds. All right, so under the Florida statutes, not all states have done this because there's federal law, but Florida has decided to go in and echo a bunch of the federal law in the state statute and then added some additional provisions. So the statute 163, which is the one we go by, government agencies may enter into interlocal agreements permitting the joint exercise of such powers or authority that agencies share in common or that each might exercise separately. And so from that, the whole point is, even to have one, there is an interlocal agreement that was put together in late 2003 and signed off by then Governor Bush that created the MPO. And so beyond that, any urbanized area, in order to receive that money, you gotta have a 3C process, and the result has to be that the plans and programs are consistent with the comprehensively planned development of the urbanized area. So we are really more tied to what happens in terms of urbanized areas than we are even the political jurisdictions. It's important that Lake and Sumter and 19 municipalities are part of the MPO, but really when it comes to the funding itself, it's about the urbanized areas. So back in 1990, Lake County was already contemplating the fact that they had what's called urban clusters that were nearing the size to warrant an MPO. In the 90s, the county was not ready to take those steps. After the 2000 census, the state basically said it was inevitable. And so the last MPO to be created in the state of Florida was created and met for the first time in February of 2004. LakeSumterMPO is number 26 of all the MPOs in Florida. And so what has occurred is that there is an urbanized area, and this, I'm jumping into 2010 at this point, there's an urbanized area that extends from Mount, and I'm gonna show you the map here in a second, that extends from Mount Dora to Leesburg. And then there's an urbanized area that extends from Fruitland Park through Lady Lake into Sumter County, taking in the villages, up into Marion County, taking in Bellevue, and that urbanized area is referred to as Lady Lake for villages. And the other one is Leesburg, Eustis, Tiberias. And then there's this little bitty gap between Bellevue and Ocala's urbanized area. And then in South Lake, we have the Orlando, let's see if I can use my mouse here. Here is the Orlando urbanized area, which includes Kissimmee and all the way up into Seminole County, up to the river. And notice that along State Road 50, Claremont, Mineola, Montverde, Groveland, Mascot are all now, not everything they've annexed. Notice, not that white area that Groveland has annexed, but we're all part of Orlando's urbanized area. Up here, Little Gap at Tangerine, and then also Apopka has popped up into the Mount Plymouth area. But there's a little gap, and we've got solid urban all the way across the land bridge into Leesburg, and then it's so hard to tell, but according to the US Census, there's a 400-foot gap in Freeman Park between Leesburg and the Lady Lake areas. So you can see that the effect when you zoom out of this urbanized block, some would say, hey, this looks like one big urbanized area. And I would say, well, we're not Orlando up here, so there's at least two. What has occurred that's caused me to bring this to the board is that if the gaps remain, that means we've got an Ocala urbanized area, a Lady Lake Villages urbanized area, a Leesburg, Tiberias Eustis urbanized area, and Claremont, Orlando. Collectively, and I'm not talking about total county population, collectively, in the urbanized areas, we have well more than 200,000 people. But that's not the way the federal law works. It's how many you have in an individual urbanized area. And so because of that, because we have 112,000 in Lady Lake Villages, and that stretches across 3 counties, we have about 154,000 in North Lake County, and then we've got, I'm not even sure of the exact number yet of South Lake, we're not actually run those numbers, and we know it's more than 80,000. So collectively, in all of the urbanized areas of the LakeSumterMPO area, we have more than 200,000 people. But the way they treat it is, if they're not contiguous, even if there's a 400-foot gap, then they're treated individually. The reason this is a concern is if the Senate version of the new transportation bill should go through and become law next year, it does change that you have to have 200,000 people in an urbanized area to have an MPO, which means, by the way it's written, our MPO goes away, and so does Ocala Marions. So they've already, up in Ocala, asserted to the Census Bureau that they don't think there's a gap. And the initial response from the Census Bureau was, blah, 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 bureaucracy, bureaucracy, we think there's a gap. So there's two sides to this. If we are determined to be contiguous, then it changes us formally because we go over that 200,000 threshold. We become not just an MPO, but a transportation management area that has MPO responsibilities, but then has some additional responsibilities, including there could be some environmental things that we have to do in terms of air quality. We start receiving directly for the board to decide on how to spend some urban funds that can go to projects. So it's no longer just DOT driving it all. The board actually gets to make funding decisions based on their allocations annually. And then on the transit end, they do not allow TMAs to use their transit money for operation and maintenance. So that's the big concern to Lake County especially, is they would not be able to say that the Lake Express is funded with 0 local funds, which it currently is. They would actually have to come up with local funds, both city and county, to fund transit operations and maintenance. So I'm bringing all this up because those green and yellow areas affect all the stuff that I just talked about. Everything the MPO does is really as much based on the urbanized areas as anything in the local community that's formed it.
Was there somebody else? Yes. With Claremont being in the Orlando region, does that mean that at some point in time that their planning is going to come under Orlando's MPO, not ours?
There's a possibility that at the state level, apart from the federal issues, that at the state level there could even be a push or an incentive or a governor mandate to change things. But right now, because of the existing Lake Sumter MPO and the fact that Claremont and the other South Lake cities are already party to an MPO, what it actually means is this MPO has to assert ourselves and tell Federal Transit Administration and Federal Highway Administration that we want our portion of the money representing the per capita in Lake County of that urbanized area. We will have to do the exact same thing with the Lady Lake Villages urbanized area because Ocala will be wanting to share in those funds. So the opportunities it brings is down at South Lake, we're now having discussions at a staff level and soon at a task force level of should we look to links to use the federal funds per the urbanized area to serve South Lake? or should we try to start a Lake Express route in South Lake, using the money that we would take back from lakes in Orlando? In the villages, the same kind of conversations occurring as to whether, since Ocala has Suntrans and it's really a city hub and spoke type system, they're having the same issue. Do we go and start a separated system down in Bellevue Villages to serve that part of Marion County? Or do we work with the LakeSumterMPO and Lake County to have one transit system serving the villages? So those are the kind of opportunities that come out of all this. Is, for me, I'm much more concerned about what is our pattern of urbanization, what has this missed, because for us, much like when I worked in Tennessee right next to the mountains, the geography and hydrology are dictating a lot of the growth patterns. I mean, everywhere you see green, there's a reason, and wherever you see white, there's a reason. There's either natural constraints, or there's already been annexations that the houses just haven't been built or filled yet, and that's definitely the case in Central Lake County.
TJ, how do they determine the urbanized areas?
It's 1,000 people per square mile, and the geographic boundaries from which they work is they work at a census block level and then down to a tract level. And if you've got less than 500 persons per square mile, you're automatically rural. So what they do is, it's easy to confirm 1,000 people per square mile, but they build that off of previous census data. And then they start looking at where they think new urban is, where new.
So there are projections in there.
This is really based on what occurred on the ground in 2010. So when I say the urbanized area, they have gone out through the census and confirmed we've got 1,000 people per square mile based on the way we've drawn our census blocks and our census tracts. So
it's just actuals?
it's actuals. Now,
Just
at the
actuals.
state level, you've got the University of Florida, through their, what's called BEBR, the Bureau of Economic and Business Research. They do projections for the state of Florida. And when you hear about growth projections from Lake County, that's where those numbers come from. It's from the University of Florida.
Okay.
Are the lines that the Census Bureau draw politically influenced, or is that a fairly non-partisan issue?
They will tell you it's completely irrespective of jurisdictional boundaries.
Okay.
So the way that, I'll say this, you will definitely have blocks and tracts built more around cities because that's where the urban population is.
Sure.
But more by city limits, I've had this before. 10 years ago, I worked for a city that had approved a 770 home development. And it was already halfway built. And so what my manager wanted me to do was go argue with the census that you need to go ahead and include this as part of the urbanized area. And their point was, we get what you're saying from a planning standpoint, but the people don't all live there yet. So it's one of those things where we're not trying to project, we're just trying to tell you what's there. And that's been the issue right now is when I saw the same 400-foot gap that I saw from 10 years ago in Brooklyn Park, it made me, say, okay, this is kind of, counterintuitive to good planning. That's pointing to the gap, by the way. I hope you all can see that little bitty area. That's the gap. So.
Can somebody build a house there? So.
Well, there's actually stuff there. It's just, it's not the way, and again, if you'll notice in both directions, those are census blocks.
Yeah.
And, and there's nobody living, but look at the way they're drawn away from each other like an hourglass.
See, that's my point, that everything could change depending on how they put their blocks together.
Absolutely.
So, and that's coming from the feds?
Yep. So what we're having to do is there's a process now that I've made the board aware of what the census says. We have until next spring to get this resolved. We either accept it or we appeal it, we give our rationale, they review it. Then we're simultaneously, now census is where Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration receives their data on urbanized, and then they run the numbers of how much funding they have and then how that's allocated per capita into those urbanized areas. So right now, there would be an allocation for everything north of that gap that would be shared Lake Sumter Marion, 2 MPOs, and then everything south and east of that gap. So that just gives you a perspective of what's occurring. And here's what's awkward for staff. I've actually managed to irritate some county commissioners by bringing this forward because in their minds, well, wait a minute, why are you trying to force us being contiguous and that makes us a bigger MPO? And I thought, that's not my agenda. The The agenda is something's about to change for us, one way or another. Either we don't mess with this at all, and the federal law changes, and now we gotta react to that, or we assert ourselves that there is no gap, and maybe we're protected against, that going away issue, that we're automatically over 200,000. But then, we lose the transit operation and maintenance from it. So, that's what's going on behind the scenes, and my concern is, this is a big enough deal, that I don't wanna wait till next spring, when it all starts to really happen. I'd rather, let's talk about these scenarios of what really is the best course of action. Just the fact that we've got technically three urbanized areas in Lake County and in the LakeSumterMPO area.
What do you think the likelihood is that they'll go ahead and adjust it?
If we really assert ourselves, right now my board is not authorizing me to do that. So I'm working on this baby steps.
See, who is the best to determine census blocks in these 4 or 5 counties around here? Is it the feds or is it us?
Well, the way they do it, they always think that they are, but what there at least is in place is criteria through which you can appeal and give your rationale, and there is a specific, in quotes, leapfrog criteria of in what circumstances can you say, oh, that's not a gap. And part of those criteria include things like public facilities. I know that in Brevard County right now, they have a gap between Titusville and Cocoa, but there's an airport exactly where the gap is. So is that really a gap?
Exactly.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I think that decision should be at the local level rather than
Yeah.
feds.
Now, obviously, we've got a road going through it, are there any utilities that you know of?
Yeah, there's commercial development there, along that corridor too. The road, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read that.
Is that all county right there?
Lake Ella?
Is that all county right there, or is
Yeah,
it
it's
one?
Lake, Lake Ella and Eagles Nest.
That roadway, see the yellow lines in both directions?
Yeah.
That is the road boundary officially between Lady Lake and River Park.
Okay.
And on the highway, they are almost meeting corporate limit spots.
TJ, regardless, even if we fill the 400-foot gap, South Lakes, would not be contiguous.
That one's automatically separated. What's interesting to me is if Ocala is successful in saying that they are contiguous, then that becomes a TMA automatically, regardless of this 400-foot. If we were successful in this one, then we're absolutely a TMA for the whole MPO. And we might even be able to work out some arrangement, should we be forced to, with Ocala and Marion County. But what's unique is the gap at Mount Dora, not much bigger between what Apopka has done, and up into Mount Plymouth across the county line and into Tangerine. So at some point, if not this census, likely by the next one, we're right back to the continuity issue with Orlando, except instead of Claremont, it's North Lake County at that point. I mean, we were really close, like, well short of a mile.
Between
The two
Mount
of them.
Dora and
Orlando, yeah.
And Orlando.
Yeah.
With this, or with Mount Dora, are there JPAs that actually meet? Was I thinking, do they actually meet or bound each other, or 180 districts for water? Because I'm thinking those are two more big criteria that you could say, hey, we're right next to each other.
The only
Might
thing
not
is-
be incorporated, but we've got our 180 district or.
The census does not take that at all. That, you go back to planning, and they are focused on what's actually there. So there gives you a little zoom in perspective. You can see there is a gap right here, barely. And this right here is Round Lake Road, I believe. Trying to make sure my bearings. Right here is Tangerine in northwest Orange County, and then we've got the little gap there as well. But all of this from Astatula, including the entire triangle and Umatilla, Grand Island, Bassville Park, what am I blanking out? What is it?
Oka.
All the way out, right there is the edge of Okahonka, but what's the Hawthorne Plantation, all the way down. So there's South Leesburg, and then here is where Groveland has annexed, and then there's all the way to Mascot. Up through here, you can see just on the west side of, in fact, there's the office right there, west side of Lake Harris. And then here's West Leesburg. And notice the way they drew the blocks. There's some retirement communities out 44, And they've managed to lump in everything out past Lake Oklahoma. Continental is one of them.
Yeah, the Continental Country Club,
Yeah.
something like that.
Rails in.
That's almost a 301.
Yep, and then here, we're down into the Coleman area. The reason you see so much here is there's 4,000 people living in the prison.
Inmates.
And then here, there's Wildwood. And then I find this really interesting too. See this line? That's 466A. And if you've been out there lately, you'll know that the villages have now expanded south of there and are selling homes. So this captured everything that they were doing in their last big phase. So now we've got a much more accurate representation of the villages instead of this little bitty corner that we used to think was our urbanized areas. Much more substantial. Still doesn't capture everybody that actually lives there because it's already 3 years old, 2 years old. But that gives you an idea. And then over here, by the way, St. John's River, Lake Monroe, and then you've got DeBerry, Deltona. And the thing for Volusia is they've had a Volusia TPO since at least the 80s. And they've always dealt with 2 urbanized areas, one in west of Volusia, and then one over at the coast, which is Daytona Beach. Well, now their urbanized area is not even called Daytona Beach anymore. It's Palm Coast, which is in Flatbush County, Daytona Beach urbanized area. So now Volusia is literally, from a governance standpoint, going, we gotta restructure everything. We've gotta get Flagler on board with a certain number of votes, get Palm Coast as the largest city now. We're gonna have to lose some votes to some that we've already assigned within Volusia. So, what are they gonna do? They're gonna weight the votes so nobody loses a vote? They're having to work through all this, and then, just a side note to add to all that, they just let their executive director go. So, they're gonna be going through some serious transition here for this year.
Wow. Good and dry.
The stuff of the MPO. All right, you know that we do indeed have a governing board that has, and on that represents 2 counties, 19 municipalities, 14 of which are in Lake and 5 are in Sumter. This is just going through all the governing board members. Of note is that we have, in addition to 16 voting members, we also have a railroad, 2 school board members. We do not treat DOT as ex officio.
I discussed it with law, I don't know if you could talk about what we already talked about, it's in the wrong place. so.
Yeah, they're not an ex officio anymore, so, in addition, now, one thing I want to explain about the voting is, state statute allows up to 19 votes on an MPO. Miami-Dade went and got special legislation because they needed to have like 26 on theirs or something, so. But for us, we started off with 13 in Lake and 1 in Sumter back in '04. And then when all of Sumter was officially added to the MPO area to make us officially a 2-county MPO, we added 2 more votes. So we went from 14 up to 16 now. That means a total of 6 county commissioners, 7 now, 5 from Lake, 2 from Sumter. 7 municipalities have a direct vote, Claremont being the largest in population, and it includes Claremont, Tiberias, Eustis, Mount Dora, Lady Lake, Mineola, and Leesburg. The bubble city in Lake County, by the way, is Groveland. They're the next one in population that would have gotten a vote, but they weren't quite there when the MPO was created. So, 7 municipalities in Lake County do not have a direct vote, but their vote rotates annually, alphabetically, among those 7 smaller municipalities. In Sumter County, we created the same type of vote for the 5 small municipalities of Sumter. Even though Wildwood takes up a considerable amount of annexed territory from Marion County, winging around the villages to the Lake County line, they still are less than 5,000 population. In fact, Coleman is 684. So we actually have in Sumter smaller municipalities than we do in Lake. Florida Central Railroad, for those of you not aware, they are a short line company that has a lease agreement with CSX to operate the tracks from North Lake County through to Aries back to Orlando. And we are also talking now with CSX, because CSX, of course, has the S line that runs through Sumter County, to ask them to participate in the MPO as an ex officio member. Our org chart, first and foremost, we work for the citizens, and the board elects, or excuse me, the citizens elect to various jurisdictions of the MPO board, and that breaks down the structure there. Off to the left, you can see that we have the executive committee, which is made up of officers of the MPO. We have the past chair, the chair-elect, the first vice chair, the second vice chair, and then we also invite the two at-large vote holders for that year to take part on the executive committee. We have the CAC, the TAC, and the BPAC. We've already talked about the two transportation disadvantage coordinating boards, and then the task forces. There are some changes pending. We are going to recommend, or we already have recommended to the board, and they did create by vote, let me start over. They were talking about the North Lake Sumter Task Force, which includes Leesburg, Fruitland Park, Lady Lake, and then Sumter County. And it was recommended by Sumter County that at this juncture, that Sumter County would prefer focus on 470, and that's the corridor between Wildwood and Leesburg that runs east-west between the Turnpike and I-75. So Lake County, we created the East Lake Task Force, the South Lake Task Force, and then this North Lake Sumter. Lake County Economic Development has followed the same map, basically, and said, hey, we're going to assign for economic development purposes someone to East Lake, someone to South Lake, and someone to Northwest Lake. So what we're doing in transition right now with task forces is officially making Lady Lake, Fruitland Park, and Leesburg part of a Northwest Lake County task force. And then we're going to work with Sumter and Wildwood on that 470 corridor with Leesburg and Lake County. The other change that might occur is Lake Express. When we started this task force a few years ago, it was to include all the cities along 441 that were benefiting from Lake Express service. And over time, we got more and more people from South Lake wanting to get into the transit discussion about when will we have State Road 50 service. And what I'm starting to see now is maybe a shift or an evolution that really the MPO and the counties are going to have to make a decision about transit planning, because we've tried to use that task force to do that and even include Sumter County and the villages as part of that, because we already come into the villages in Sumter County at Spanish Springs, but we want to expand that service up there, just like we want to expand it in South Lake. The problem, I think, is we need to decide how much influence the MPO is really going to have on policy decisions, because any planning or policy decisions the MPO makes, the counties, both Sumter and Lake, are the funding agencies. They're the ones that receive the grants directly to fund buses and shelters and benches and to pay drivers and buy gas and all the maintenance. So, for example, Lake Express, and I'm using this for a moment just to go off on a tangent for a moment, but Lake Express, for example, costs about $1.2 million to operate the 4 routes, 7 buses. And so currently the way we've structured the fact that Lake County pursues grants and gets a certain amount of money and then uses a little bit of general fund money to help offset the cost to run paratransit, we actually receive more grants for Lake Express than it costs to run it. And that will change over time. So what I'm looking at is, if we've got people in North Lake and South Lake, plus possibly a new transit development plan that would include the villages, at some point we're probably going to have to evolve this Lake Express task force into something more. So I want to take this org chart as an opportunity to kind of give you all some background in that direction. On the right, the state agencies that we deal with all the time, of course. DOT is a statewide agency, but specifically District 5, which is 9 counties here in Central Florida. There is a Florida Transportation Disadvantage Commission, and we do receive grants each year for Lake and Sumter to fund our paratransit program. And then Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, we deal with them because, of course, the Turnpike main line runs through both counties. Federal Transit, Federal Highway, Federal Aviation, Federal Railroad, all part of US DOT, so we work with them. Yes, sir.
Go back for a moment to the different task forces.
Yep.
The MPO. You said you were going to separate Sumter County, essentially take it out of the North Lake task force. Is it going to be its own task force? Is that what you mean?
We're honestly, the way we operate with Sumter is they're like dealing with a large municipality. So we are able very effectively, staff to staff, to take care of And when we started looking at coordination, the two issues that are common to the three cities in Northwest Lake, there's three. The US 441 widening, getting a reliever built from Muddy Lake to Leesburg, and then Gardini Trail. Sumter's interest in that is only peripheral because they're interested in how that new road might impact Sumter County, because as you get close to State Road 44, we have to shift over to the county line.
Right.
So what they're basically saying is, if when it comes to focusing on something, they want their focus to be on working with Leesburg on the 470 corridor, because they see that as a huge, and they're right, it's a huge economic development opportunity. So that's why between geographically shifting things a little bit, and then how we evolve transit, and the reason this is something that will probably be a recurring item is I went up and spent some time with the Ocala Marion director of their TPO, and their TPO actually manages the contract for fixed route in Ocala. So everything that he needs to get addressed policy-wise, he actually takes to his TPO board to decide on transit, because you've got Marion County and Ocala all right there on the same group. With the way it is in Lake and Sumter, we're not quite there yet. So we're going to keep taking baby steps on how to best organize, and my focus is going to be back to, it's not really about counties, it's about the urbanized area.
TJ, do we still have the express routes from South Lake into Orlando?
Yes, they, Link 204 still runs 5 buses in the morning and 5 in the evening, and it's the only type of fixed route that is funded out of the general fund. Everything Lake Express is federal grant money, but that, and there's a little route that pops into Four Corners, that also they pay out of general fund links to do that one. So I'm not sure what the status is going to be after this next budget.
That's Lake County General Funds money for that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. And then, the Central Florida MPO Alliance consists of 6 MPOs. It includes our 3-county MPO, Metro Plan Orlando, the Space Coast TPO, which is Brevard, the Volusia TPO, the Ocala Marion TPO, and the Polk TPO. And so, me and the Metro Plan Orlando director like to joke that with all these TPOs, it's good that there's 2 real MPOs still in Central Florida. He takes pride in referring to Metro Plan Orlando as MPO. And I have to agree with him. It does say something about your elected officials. They get so consumed with the name that they go through all that trouble to change it. Now, and the reason that is in the federal law, it does not matter what you call your agency. You are no matter what legally an MPO. There's no, you can call yourself Metro Plan Orlando, you can call yourselves the Chocolate Factory, whatever, but you're still by law an MPO. The other entity I wanted you to know, and by the way, that Central Florida MPO Alliance, we meet quarterly. In fact, we're meeting next week, and this time we're meeting jointly with a similar alliance for the Tampa region called the Tampa Chairs Coordinating Committee. And so that group consists of all the MPOs around the Tampa Bay area. And bear in mind where I'm coming from. We've got a 3-county MPO as our neighbor, and we are a 2-county. The others in our Central Florida Alliance are single county, but Volusia is about to see that change with the addition of Flatbush. What I wanted to mention about Tampa is they have a Hillsborough County MPO, a Pinellas County MPO. We've already talked about Polk. There is a Pasco County MPO, a Hernando County MPO, and then a Sarasota and Manatee that used to be separate county MPOs. Sarasota and Manatee actually got together. The fragmentation of that process of all these individual county MPOs trying to do a metropolitan regional transportation plan, the fragmentation apparently was so bad that the Tampa Chamber and business community literally got legislation passed forcing them to cooperate. And that's why the Chairs Coordinating Committee was formed, because it was legislatively required of them. Whereas our Central Florida MPO Alliance is completely voluntary. It started out with Metro Plan and Volusia, and then all the others came on board over time. And it's very interesting because we've stayed away from controversial territory the last few years, but this is the first year at the Alliance meetings that we're talking about the Alliance actually helping set regional funding priorities for the big projects like I-4 managed lanes and Powder Parkway, and I-95, I-75. So it's not official yet, but that's a direction that that alliance is going. And then statewide, there's Florida MPO Advisory Council. And this is like the legislative arm of all MPOs. So all 26 MPOs from Panhandle to Miami-Dade take part quarterly in coming together. They bring typically a governing board meeting and their staff director, and we go over everything legislative. So what just happened in the session, what should we be gearing up for the new session? This is a group that managed a 1.5 year long study on transportation revenues through the Revenue Study Advisory Committee, and that will bring fruit, that there will actually be a bill come out of that work. And then finally, to wrap this up, on the org chart, which I want to make sure you know who all's here. Hopefully you know me and Pam, and Francis is back there. If you've had any dealings on anything not involving roads, then you know who Mike Woods is. I give him everything not involving cars. Olga Marcondes is our data person. She's the one that does traffic study reviews. She maintains the data on the traffic counts and reserve trips and encumbered trips and all those things. And then we've got my right-hand person that keeps me straight is Sue. Hopefully you all know Sue because you get her emails. But she helps me in a lot of facets, including while preparing our budget and keeping my calendar straight. Because literally I feel like I work for Sue. She's the one that tells me what to do. In addition to that, I want to make it clear that Pam's real role is she's the go-to person whenever we've got a contract to manage. And whenever I've got some project, I just can't do it myself, so it always falls to Pam. Whereas Francis's role is a little bit, Pam's is wide open. It's never the same day twice. Francis at least has a system that he maintains. So hopefully you all know what geographic information systems are. So lots of great maps. He does great maps, but what I like even more is the data under the maps, and that's where Francis really shines, is making that data manageable and getting things geocoded and in the system. And he also works with Mike on on crash data. Pam manages the traffic counts contract, but we all kind of have a crossover that she might manage the traffic counts contract, but Olga has to deal with traffic counts. Mike might actually run a crash data report, but Francis maintains the data itself. So, all these things are going on. And then I don't want to leave out Nancy Valenzano. She helps in a lot of capacity. She's really helping Mike heavily on paratransit. So I use the transportation disadvantaged grants for Lake and for Sumter, and that funds Nancy's position to provide support to the transportation disadvantaged coordinating boards and to help Mike as we're doing service plans and transit development plans and all that fun stuff. So that kind of gives you an overall view of who's here, and if there's no questions, I'll start wrapping stuff up here. So I've already talked about the executive committee. You already know who the TAC and CAC are. We talked about the coordinating boards for each county and the BPAC. BPAC is really unique because they do get super specialized. My first inclination was, if you've got a Citizens Advisory Committee, why BPAC 2? But really the issues are so specialized and do require their own attention in order to kind of keep non-automobile issues at the forefront. And so I'm very proud of the BPAC's work. One of the outcomes has been huge support and a lot of success on the Safe Routes to School study that we've been doing. We've already finished Sumter, we're halfway through Lake, and BPAC's a big part of reviewing that work. Our products. I stalled it for a minute. It's getting steep. Okay. Our biggest thing is producing that long-range transportation plan, because it's always at least a 3-year effort when we're doing one of the plans. The next one, in fact, starts up this coming year, and it'll be a 2040 plan. So safe, efficient, that's always part of it. Intermodal, multimodal in terms of not just the modes, but also our focus on economic development and freight and goods movement. All that's part of it. So we will be looking out to 2040 on that next plan. But right now we're under transportation 2035 for the next couple of years. DTDM is very unique. It's something that we wanted to at least make you aware of because it's really staff-based. You all don't really hear too much about it, but before we even do a planning, development, and environment study, we do what's called efficient transportation decision-making, and we go ahead and send out, and Pam heads this up, we send out an alert to the agencies that we've got a project for everybody to take a look and see if you see a fatal flaw in what's proposed. So if there's some huge environmental conflict, or historic, or sociological, or whatever it may be, archaeological, whatever the issue could be that may prevent you from getting federal or state funding, we try to find that out before we go and spend $1 million on a PD&E study. So one of the things that we kind of help Florida, because Florida is one of the first states in the country, in fact, they're the model state for doing this approach. One of the things that we've been part of is assisting DOT in elevating this process by doing the public involvement. So our best one is when we did a planning screen for Central Lake County. We studied State Road 19, County Road 561, and County Road 48, Ascatula, Howey, Ilaha area, and said, before we choose to study any one road, let's look at the whole network and determine what it is that we really should be focusing on. And we had 3 meetings, one in Mineola, one in Ascatula, and one in Howey, to get public involvement, get public comment. Because of the State Road 19 bridge over Little Lake Harris, we had 120 people show up at Howey for this. And so we knew we were onto something. And what came out of that is this. In the plan, we agreed that we would put State Road 19 in there and work to replace the bridge. That study has already been funded, and the bridge replacement funds have already been offered. So in just 3 short years, we're actually seeing something come of that. But what was interesting is that public involvement and this early analysis that we did allowed us in our plan to say, we're not going to treat State Road 19 and County Road 561 as 2 corridors. We're going to treat it as 1 corridor with 4 lanes, and then determine what's really needed from here. And so we literally took the option of 4-laning 561 through Ascatula out of the plan, or 4-laning 48 through Ilaha out of the plan, and 4-laning Howey in the Hills out of the plan. We said the only real need is from Tavares across that bridge to Mission Inn. That's where the traffic splits. So we don't need a 4-lane through Howey or 4-lane through Ilaha, but something's got to be done about this bridge, and this is our bottleneck. And so we felt like something really positive came out of that. This is one MPO I can say that is very anxious to not widen roads if we can help it. The transit development plan is a 10-year period. We have one that's currently through 2020. That animation goes whether I want it to or not.
I know. Thought I would be trying.
Our last big update of the transit development plan was purely for Lake, although it did have some references to what we were doing in the villages. And it looked out to 2020, and it's been updated through minor updates a couple times. We're doing one last minor update. And next year, whole big overhaul that we want to do, a Lake County integrated with the Sumter County plan. This will literally be Sumter County's first ever transit development plan. So out of that is how you qualify for the Federal Transit Administration funding and for DOT to administer it. We also have our own work program of how we take the federal money that the MPO directly receives and what tasks we accomplish. It's called the Unified Planning Work Program. But what I want you all to know is, apart from any budget, apart from any of the planning documents you see, this is the thing that's actually our required thing as staff to report to agencies on how we spend the money. So in there you'll find that we have broken things into 7 categories: administration, data collection, long range and short range planning, transit planning, public involvement, and then under special projects, I've lumped a lot of our regional efforts into there, where we're doing outreach to the Alliance across county lines with Orange County, for example, or with Marion County. But that details all the money that we receive, and then from state and federal sources, and then how that's spent on tasks and personnel. The 5-year TIP, that one's important, because that's where we hold some power as an MPO board. We have an interactive tip online that you can go onto and can click on the map and find information on all the projects that have funding programmed either this budget year or the next 4 years in terms of anticipated budgets. So there's some legal binding aspects of the MPO here that if DOT programs funds to go out and buy right away and construct something, if we don't agree with that project, we don't put it in our TIP and they can't do it. It's that simple. It has to be in the MPO plan and in the MPO TIP. And technically speaking, they also, before they'll even fund it, we've got another document I'm about to share with you, but really the most true power is the MPO's ability through checks and balances to either put something in or not put something in TIP. And I'll give you an example. It was extremely time sensitive this spring to get LakeSumter Parkway into TIP. And so when they came to us the day of our meeting and said, we just learned from our work program people that the funds are available now, can you take this to your board today? And asked them to add the LakeSumter Parkway project. Luckily, staff has spent so much time at every meeting talking about LakeSumter Parkway that everybody felt comfortable in doing that. But had they not, it would have delayed approval by the Federal Highway Administration of that huge project. Similarly, we can
Read
use
it from the paper yesterday, I think it's getting fully funded.
It is fully funded. They qualify, and Federal Highway has released their hold, it was finding of no significant impact. But here's the other way. It is extremely important to the MPO, to Lake County, and to Mount Dora to accomplish the Cottage Trail. And DOT has been kind enough to fund a study, and next year has designed, I keep saying next year, its design's actually for 3 years out. So it's nice that they've programmed, they've given us money to study, the study's open, and then design funds are coming. But the problem is, the road is moving faster than the trail. And the trail is integral to us and making this happen. So last month, my board approved a draft memorandum of understanding to send to DOT and the Expressway Authority, saying, we want to completely define how you are going to help us accomplish this trail. Specifically in the right-of-way of the LakeSumter Parkway, we want DOT to just build it. So now they're gonna have to react to that, because if they don't react favorably, really the MPO's only recourse is to say, okay, if you're not gonna work with us, don't bother sending us anything else on LakeSumter Parkway. That's our power to say, checks and balances, that if you work with us, then we can certainly, and we have been extremely supportive of this project, politically, in every way possible, so I have no guilt about saying we've got to leverage what power we have. All right, so there's what the interactive TIP looks like. When you're actually on that page, you can take the little identifier, the little eye tool over the tops of these things, and then it'll light up and you can click on what you're looking for. The other way is you can just go in and enter into the search the name of the project and it'll bring it up for you as well. But everything to do with the funding is in that TIP. And a new requirement that we will be reporting in the coming year is not just what phase is programmed, but what was the total project cost for that project, from study, design, right-of-way, construction. Yeah. All right. That gives you an idea of all the layers you can turn on and off. The legend explaining that some of these are roadway construction projects, some are resurfacing, some may be enhancement projects or sidewalk projects. As you can see on here, as I go over, you'll notice FM, that's financial management number that DOT uses, so that's the reference. And if it's a county project, it'll give you a county, much shorter number.
TJ, can you go to the intersection of 1527?
I can't, I'm not actually on
Yeah,
the
you
page.
can,
You're
I
on the
didn't know,
page?
I didn't know Francis had made it hot. You are actually on the interactive tip.
Yes, I can. 1527.
You link to it, you link the page, you link the slide.
Let's see how good you are.
You link
You
the-
did.
New Testament.
You just link the
Yeah.
slide.
There's 1527.
We need to bring a teenager in here to run that for us.
I don't worry about it, it's.
See there at the bottom, as soon as I clicked on that, it gives you the fields,
Okay.
and it says, I'm sorry, north of, there we go.
Marvin
West
Drive,
Bloxham.
County Road 33, and then
Okay.
from west to
Bloxham.
Bloxham, So you're,
add lanes, construct, interchange.
If you move the legend out of the way, TJ, it'll give you the link to that. The one that says legend.
On the left.
Oh,
Yeah, move that out of the way, yeah, just grab it and bring it somewhere else.
oh, crap.
There you go. Now click on the FM number link there, bottom left, any one of those. Then that should bring up a report in a short second here, so it all depends on your speed here.
Better feed that squirrel, it's getting all tired.
Yeah.
So you got a little inset map, you can see
Here's all the
construction
monies,
phase, design, all the funding, whether it's state or federal, it tells you what year it's in. So all that's available to you. Cool.
If you wanna go back to the presentation, TJ, if you're done with that, just click out. Yeah, come back to that, right there. One more down. Yeah?
All right.
and don't
Oh.
click in the same place, click
Yeah.
at the top or something.
Go back to the presentation.
I thought that was a presentation. Okay.
No, it's, for whatever reason, it's linked. Yeah, right there. Go back
Bottom
there.
one?
Yeah, hit that one.
Okay,
Now, hold on a second.
okay.
With your roller on the mouse, I keep forgetting you have the mouse. There you go. Roll forward. And click.
Yay.
That's the next slide.
No.
Whatever you do, don't click there.
There you go, okay.
There you go.
All right, here's that other document. This one comes up a lot. Local governments want a project funded. And before we can really be successful at getting it funded, it has to be on the MPO's list of priority projects. So there's a process that we do every summer, and we've just kicked it off. We'll be coming back with a draft that's kind of staff recommended with committee input. We'll take that draft to the governing board in June, get all the comments on it, and then bring it back for final approval in August. So we do break it down by funding category. We try to separate out priorities logically to say, first of all, if it's a strategic intermodal system facility, which means, US 27 in Claremont or I-75 or something like that, that's not going to be competing with a smaller project that might be on some other state road. We also do not make sidewalks directly compete. We don't make transit directly compete. We separate everything out by table based on the funding source. But what I do like, in addition to that, is that we, on road projects, have production or planning. And if we're buying right away, we're about to build something, that needs to be a top priority, because we're getting to shovel ready. If we're still studying it or designing it or something like that, we keep that in the planning phase. And so we separate that out for D&T, because inevitably, the way their funds work is we'll tell them what our most important construction project is, and we've been very successful about getting those funded. I mean, Claremont, everything's been funded down there now. So what we sometimes have to do, though, is we'll get a call, and I get this annually. Hey, we found some money, but we can only spend it on studies. Do you have any studies you want us to do? Well, why don't you look at the list? It says right here, the next study is. So we are literally to the point where every single project in our long-range plan has already either been studied or is being studied right now. We are out of projects. So we're literally having to go out of the cost feasible plan and go into the needs plan, which is not based on cost feasibility, just to find two more roads that need to be studied at some point. One of them's in Groveland and one of them's in Mineola. So when we look at priorities, your staff is like looking at 1,000 years working together, going, all right, what's the best way to get the money? And I think that approach is working because we keep getting the money. All right, so other things we have to do, there is a public involvement plan that's official, and in it, it defines how the exact methods that we're going through to get the public involved, and we're also supposed to have measurables to show that it's working. Not just, did you run an ad and did anybody show up, but what happened in terms of did the people, were they able to show that they understood the information that was presented, and we've gotten creative. We don't throw a classified ad and hope people show up here. We are taking more and more things out into the public, setting up surveys and information kiosks at various retail places and where the public gathers. We've done everything from Lake Square Mall to Wooten Park and to Dairies and other events like that. We've had great success in Claremont, working through the South Lake Chamber, for example, and the MPO is a member of all 9 chambers in the 2-county area, South Lake being the most active in the MPO. And it shows. I mean, that's why there's so much that's happened in South Lake in the last few years, transportation-wise.
I thought that was because of me getting in.
It helps. Doesn't hurt.
Well, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Of course. Some of the strategic stuff that we do, lots of special studies like the Safe School Access Study that we're doing with Safe Routes to School money. Really gotten focused in the bicycle pedestrian area, that between Trails Master Plan, the school plan, and the fact that for the first time ever, the MPO is directly managing a PD&E study. It's the first time we've ever done that. Normally some other entity like DOT in the county does that, but in this case, we've got like the Cabot Trail, we can actually do that. Some of the operational products that we do, of course, maps and policies and resolutions and all that. We've got some special products in addition that we kind of jumped into service-wise. Some of that includes our TMS, which is something I take a lot of pride in, that we've got all that data in a one-stop shop format involving traffic counts, approved trips. What's important about approved trips is these are entitled trips that have a right to be put on the road. The development's been approved, just not built. So if it's been approved and entitled, we'd like to be able to plug that number in and get a feel for what's the transportation going to look like once it builds, since it's already approved. So that was something that was missing, and the poster child for that, to ever get our transportation management system started, was State Road 50. We realized that between Lake County unincorporated and Claremont and Mineola and Groveland and Mascot and Montbur, all independently looking at traffic differently, and nobody communicating at all, we watched State Road 50 go from 24,000 cars a day to 54,000 cars a day in a 5-year period. So we said, if we just started counting all the approvals, maybe that would help us. And it's funny, because once we built this awesome system, is when the Great Recession began, and nobody was worried about growth anymore. So. But the system's good. We've got
the recession.
Yeah. We've got the crash data as part of this, and also as far as services, I really, really enjoy the fact that every jurisdiction can tell any applicant to send their traffic study to us, and you get a consistent, unbiased review of traffic. And what I really love is the consultants all over Central Florida are used to us now, and they know what to expect, and they know Olga, they know Pam, they know me, so there's no games to be played. Our safety program involving crash data is great, and what I love about it, it's not just the crash reports and where they happen, what types of crash, what are the countermeasures that we can go out and ask our public works departments to go and implement, whether it could be design of the intersection, it could be lighting, it could be the need for a stop control device, but that's something that it involves more than just planning. It involves engineers, it involves law enforcement, emergency response, so it's a pretty broad-based safety program that we have. Pam is managing our pavement management program, so both Sumter County and Eustis thus far are our clients on this. Sumter County seems very happy that we assess all of their roads, and we started the program last year. Now they're on a system that every 4 years they will have each year worked at 25%. Every 4 years they would have reassessed all the roads in Sumter County, and then in addition, the program helps communicate to staff and their county commission scenarios of, if you want to stay status quo and spend no more money, here's what you're looking at the long-term effects being. If you just want to spend a little bit more, here's how much we start getting out of the hole. And if you want to really actually fix everything, here's how much that'll cost. So that helps when you're trying to communicate the fact that with pavement management, every year you let it go, you start reaching this critical point where you've actually lost your asset. So at some point, some roads have been allowed to deteriorate where you can't go in and repave them. You have to go in and replace the entire base, restabilize, rebuild the road. So Eustis has taken our service, and they're doing something unique with it. In their discussions with Lake County about turning over certain county roads to the city of Eustis, they are utilizing us to go in and determine the real condition of that asset. Is it something that Lake County really should fix before they hand over to Eustis? Or is it in good enough shape that really Eustis, you'll be okay? So we're trying to serve as an unbiased third party on
We'll
that.
take it, we
I
can
bet
get some
Jim
money to
Steiner
fix it.
loves that. I bet Steiner loves that thing.
It's his idea.
The city's telling what they want.
Well, it's a good thought and it is irritating to me as a citizen that there is a road with a city subdivision on both sides, and it's still a county road.
Yeah.
And it's not a collector, it's not just a
Yeah, a
residential
lot of
street.
And there's no interlocal for the city to maintain it.
It has to be by mutual consent.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we talked about pavement management, we talked a lot about traffic counts. And one of the things for our elected official is, we heard some responses from some of the cities that they might make a request of the county to do certain traffic counts at a location, and the county staff would just say, not interested, we don't think it's needed. We're not going to do that. If the city wants a very low traveled streets studied for counts, that's what you're paying for, so we will do that. Then, of course, our future plans, we are working right now directly on the Orange Blossom Express study of using the track along the 441 corridor. But we're also working with Links on the fact that they're studying State Road 50 and US 192 into Lake County, and we're going to coordinate with them on that. Very, very excited about working with Florida Central on improving the tracks for freight, and then hopefully having passenger rail service on that one day. On the Trails Master Plan that we did for Lake County, the big thing there is just trying to accomplish the fact that we get all these pieces now built. Can we just connect them? And we're really hoping that Suffolk County will, I know Wildwood is supportive, but we'd like to do a Suffolk County master plan as well. What we've really gotten more support from Suffolk County on has been the Scenic Byway program. And so we are actively working with them on the, Scenic Sumter Heritage Byway. It took me a minute. I had to do it. Scenic Sumter Heritage Byway. We do DRI review. We haven't had one in a little while, but we had 3 at one time in Wildwood.
We almost had one. We thought we
Almost.
did,
It'll
in
come back.
Wildwood, but they were just kind of playing around. We're all
We'll be back.
disappointed.
Yeah, so in this area, DRIs have a lot of stuff that has to be prepared. We stick to just transportation, and rather than our cities or counties having to hire a consultant to do the transportation aspects of the DRI, we're able to do that for about half the cost of what it would take to go outsource it.
What's a DRI?
That's a good question. The DRI is a development of regional impact, and there's state statutes that say once you're of a certain threshold, you have to go through a DRI process to get entitlements. So in Lake County, for example, there were several accomplished in South Lake.
Kings Ridge, the Legends,
Lost Lake.
Heritage Hills, that's one big one. Lost Lake's another one. Plaza Colina. Yeah. I still think they should be sunsetted. If they aren't developed, get rid of them after 5 years or something, because they take up a lot of traffic.
Well, the Villages is by far our biggest DRI in the two-county area. But what happened after the Villages in Wildwood, and I wasn't being facetious, Wildwood annexed about 20,000 acres, and right now they have 3 active DRIs that have not built yet. So we have been in communication with, over the last 3 years with the ownership. One of them's been in touch more than the others, but just to give you a perspective, out County Road 470, down here through Oklahoma. When you drive out and cross over the turnpike, first of all, in Leesburg, before you cross the turnpike, you go to DRI on the south side of the road, and it would allow about 3,500 homes if I remember correctly. As you drive on out 470, on the north side, there's a primarily industrial commercial DRI called Southern Oaks that would butt up against the turnpike. And as you keep driving, across from the Coleman Prison is the Landstone DRI, it's 8,000 homes. And then as you get on over toward Coleman on County Road 468, which is going to have a new interchange built by the Villages, just before you get to 301 is another DRI with about 3,500 homes called Wildwood Springs. And that's all in addition to the Villages. And then we're hearing rumblings that there may be more, so.
The development of Brownwood, I don't know if y'all have been out 44 lately. You blink and there's a new building there.
Yeah, the new town square.
And
Yeah.
if you talk to Wildwood, they're getting a lot of interest because the Villages is moving,
Yep.
People know the mall's coming and all that property around there, that's the word property,
There's a
they just
mall?
bought Brownwood, it's
Brownwood,
gonna be a
a mall,
mall.
yeah.
But I think, has the movie theater opened yet?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be a new town square, but it's gonna have
Okay.
the things that are on 441, the
Yeah.
still big stores, it's gonna be kind of incorporated. in there.
Okay, I was thinking this is a mall and
Oh.
closed mall. I was
No,
thinking
no,
that's the
no,
first
no.
enclosed mall, I think.
I would call it a slightly better version of Winter Garden Village.
Okay.
'Cause I like that one, but it's still a cute town center next to big boxes.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a little bit more, still big boxes.
Something like a Fowler Grove, but with the big boxes in there too, or? Okay.
It's all a matter of scale. I'm
Yeah.
curious to see how it looks, because what we've been talking about with Plaza Colina, and I'm getting off on topics, but is, rather than have the big boxes lined up like we did at Fowler's Burrows, and then have your cute town center, which works.
Yeah.
How about scaling those big boxes
Some nodes.
into, yeah, maybe do 2 floors? That's not out of the ordinary, so.
Yeah.
But, anyway, developments of regional impact as far as Lake and Sumter have really been the defining development decisions. I mean, all the little subdivisions, they accumulate and total a lot of growth, but these DRIs are the ones that change Lake County and Sumter.
That changed the traffic.
Yep. All right. We've got that done, I think.
I imagine what the DRIs look like for the village.
Yep, it kept changing too.
Yeah.
All right, so for both counties, we also work with Sumter County Transit and Lake County Public Transportation on a transportation disadvantage service plan. And basically what it does is it goes in, through a process, we evaluate, in addition to monitoring and planning for the paratransit service. And so the service plan gets into some policy decisions, some financials, but I'll give you an example. It's this document that Lake County Commission had to use recently when they realized they didn't have enough money to make it through this year. They weren't gonna make it to September 30th because their, costs were going up because Medicaid funding was cut off. Cut down, I'll just say. So they had to go to this document, and it says in there that should that scenario occur, of the 4 types of trips, which include workforce, education, nutrition, and medical, that they were gonna cut out workforce and education, and they would only provide nutrition and medical trips. So that change this year is what's allowing them to still meet budget, but they are literally denying, several hundred trips a month that they used to provide. I don't think that Sumter County's run into that yet. So far, so good, as far as being able to meet the financial projections. The other thing I want to mention about this and paratransit. Paratransit is the van that you call 24 hours in advance. You have to qualify for the trip. They come to your driveway, they take you to your destination, wherever you qualify for, and then back home. And each one of those counts as a trip. And they're pretty expensive. I know, anywhere from $18 to $21, I've seen it fluctuate the last few years, per trip. The idea with the Lake Express is we have 2 things going on. 441 will never be widened to 8 lanes, and there is no other road to build to help take traffic off of 441. It runs on a land bridge, so you've got lakes to deal with. So between all the urbanization of the villages in Lady Lake and everything in the triangle, with Leesburg in between, it does, just from a transportation planning standpoint, make sense that if you're not gonna be adding more lanes and going to 8-lane 441, might wanna start moving toward transit, because it's kind of inevitable with all this urban population, you gotta give it some sort of options. Well, we have a lot of population in Lake County that uses paratransit, and a lot of them are senior. And so the idea was, whoever's physically able, let's start migrating them away from the vans and onto the Lake Express bus, which is a whole lot cheaper, a ride to provide, about 1/3 the cost as compared to the van trip. So that's the real impetus, is that we've got a demographic to migrate onto Lake Express. We've got planning issues that make us have to look at 441 a little differently. And then add to all that, the fact that, for where we're trying to go long term with public transportation in general, we would really like to see the Lake Express increase in frequency, because then it's not the the option of desperation. People start choosing to ride it if it's convenient. And so what we've learned since we started this migration plan the last 4 to 5 years is we're seeing it work. The costs have come down in paratransit because we're getting more and more people on the Lake Express. But there was something else that occurred. We started surveying people, assuming that we were going to hear on the Lake Express how our demographic was seniors, going to shopping, medical trips, things like that. We were surprised. Even though we're helping the paratransit issue, over 60% of the ridership on Lake Express is riding it for work purposes. we found some interesting trends. We found really interesting the number of people that use Route 3 specifically to work in downtown Mount Dora. That was interesting. We saw people that live in Eustis riding all the way to Lady Lake and Spanish Springs to work. So, and then, of course, we saw a lot of exchange between Tavares and Leesburg, a lot of, community college, people in the mall. So there was a lot of ridership there in the center, but the reason I tie all this to transit is, it all started with the fact that Lake County and Sumter County do support, to the best of their financial ability, their most vulnerable populations receiving the ability to get to medical and nutrition trips, and hopefully to workforce and education again for Lake. So, we do comp planning. We have to make sure what we do is consistent with all the cities and the two counties' comp plans in terms of transportation, land use, and all those things. We don't make land use decisions, but we sure as heck recommend not to make bad ones. So what our little theme was, just as the growth was slowing down, was don't sprawl y'all. Because the biggest problem we've had is we cannot react to all this extremely sprawled out development that automatically, when you've got one entrance to your subdivision and every subdivision loads onto the same county road that was built to support the citrus industry, we started realizing a trend that we cannot widen every road in Lake County. The best thing to do is start looking at better connecting things, start looking at not sprawling out so far, and what are we doing to build communities? Because when we start using our schools, for example, as a way to kind of be the centerpiece of the community, it makes it a lot easier to plan traffic, as well as the kids walking on the sidewalk and the bicyclists and all those things. So that ties directly into comp planning. I think we're just about done.
Have 30 seconds on tape.
And the end. So what are the questions remain? Because I try not to use any jargon. I'm glad you called out DRI. We try not to use the alphabet soup. But what's some big questions? You're just getting to know the agency, so I know why you're here, because he's going to be working with us a lot. But and Jim's been working with us for years at TAC, and you've been on CAC for at least, what, 4 or 5 years? 6, and you're brand new, so I know you're just trying to.
I'm a newbie, man. I'm just being force-fed with a fire hose here, man, getting all this stuff.
What still remains is a big question.
You know, I have been focused on, you know, protecting property rights, improving people's mobility, you know, those kind of things, and, you know, free enterprise opportunities.